Welcome to the Healing Bitch podcast. I'm Jackie Ortez, a psychic medium that has a penchant for all things spiritual. During this time with me, we will explore the world of energy and how it affects us all. Each podcast will address a question submitted from my listeners that I feel I have the authority to answer. So get comfy, throw on your headphones, and let's see what happens. Hey guys, welcome back to the Healing Bitch podcast. We're here with Ray Sette again, as he's becoming my favorite guest. I said that last time. So
we have a lot of fun.
You're watching a new one though.
We have a lot of fun. Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about spiritual protection.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I learned a while ago is that somehow I need to be protected quite a lot, which most of us do at this point. I have my, the standard evil eye bracelets, and I do protection myself, which we'll be talking about some of those techniques. But a fun thing is 2 weeks ago, I decided to get a intuitive hand-poked spiritual tattoo for protection, just for the heck of it. On top of it, there's this one artist that's around Red Bank, and she does them. I'm actually going to link her information, and they're really cute. It's on the back of me, so I'm not going to turn around and show you, but I might put it at the end. She had all these tattoos laid out, and each one is unique, and they all have a meaning that are associated with them, and there's all Reiki infused.
Oh, nice.
So all of them,
Very
and
cool.
she is covered, and everyone at the event was covered in these protection tattoos as well. And I picked protection. At first I was going to choose new beginnings, and I was like, I'm doing that anyway. I don't need a tattoo to say that, or, I was like, but we could always use protection. And
Always, yes.
And
absolutely.
It's a really cute, it's just like a little moon with a bunch of dots all around it. So
That's very cool.
I am super, super protected.
There
now.
you go. I always like to talk about how we're all connected to energy and spirit.
Yes.
I personally, I don't necessarily consider what I demonstrate to really be a gift. I don't see it as a gift. That's just and I'm not discrediting anyone else. I believe that I understand rather that I have an ability that every one of us has the opportunity to work with. It doesn't mean that, everyone is to go out and do readings per se.
No.
It's one, to recognize certainly how spirit is very much part of our lives and how spirit is guiding us. And that on an energy etheric level, we're all connected. Mm-hmm. We all have this vibrational energy field around us called the human aura that allows us to perceive, pick up other people's whatever energies, vibrational frequencies of certain experiences, certain places. We're not always taught to recognize that. We are supposed to understand how to keep ourselves shielded and protected from the discord of the outside world. And again, we're not conventionally taught to do that, but I do believe that in the times to come, this information will be much more prevalent and much more welcoming as we continue evolving, to a higher vibrational frequency overall, if you will. And when I've been doing this work now on a full-time basis. It's going to be 20 years. I began doing sessions with clients probably around 1990, but I was in corporate and I wasn't doing it on a full-time basis. But, once I embarked on this, I even though I worked for many years with instructors, with mentors, I was never really taught about protection and really understanding the importance and the significance of keeping myself shielded and protected.
Really?
No, but I understand why though.
Okay.
I understand why. And at first I found it very strange that no one really talked to me about the importance of keeping myself energetically shielded and protected. It was briefly touched upon over the years, but the significance was never really elaborated upon. And it was back to when we talked earlier about that 2012 time frame when I fully began to realize and understand the importance of keeping myself shielded and protected and grounded from the discord of the outside world, as well as from working with clients and how much I was picking up from clients.
Absolutely.
You know, I didn't understand how much I was interacting on an energy level certainly with other people, from working one-on-one, as well as conducting group and public events, and what I was picking up from all of that.
Well, yeah, because technically you're not doing like the energy healing kind of, like you're doing like the...
Well, it's not necessarily... Well, you know what? At some level,
I'm
it could
sure
be considered a healing.
Well, yeah, I
but
mean,
it's
like...
the essence of it, it's kind of the same because you're processing energy.
Yeah, but I
It's
mean,
the process of energy.
like technically, like doing your sessions and stuff, it wouldn't on the outside look like you would absorb the energy, but you
Correct.
are.
But it's an energy exchange. Even
Absolutely.
right now, we're having an energy exchange.
Oh, yeah,
with
I
us,
feel it.
with him over there.
I feel it. Yeah.
You know, I just flatlined for a second there. All right, but
It happens. It happens to me all the time.
But what I'm emphasizing is, you know, I needed to have the experience of discovering all of this on my own.
I see.
So that I have a firsthand understanding
Of how important it is.
of how important it is, but also how it works. You know, there never goes by a day that I don't begin my day asking for protection, energetic, spiritual protection. You know, and I periodically energetically clear myself, ground myself. You know, there are some techniques. There's many tools and techniques out there, and I always suggest, you know what, go out and do some research and embrace what resonates with you.
Exactly. Do something that feels right to you, feels easy to you.
You know, spirit will always let you know what is best for you. We're just, again, not taught to recognize that.
No.
You know, and with all the distractions and the cacophonies of the outside world, we're not clear as to how spirit is communicating with us and how spirit is guiding us, you see. And if your energy field is riddled with all that discord, you're not going to be clear with what spirit is sharing with you.
No.
You know, for example, before I conduct a group event like we've had in the past with you, I dedicate, because generally the events I schedule at night. So the entire day is dedicated before I leave the door. I am dedicated to clearing myself and grounding myself through various techniques that I use throughout the day, so that I can be energetically prepared to be very clear with what spirit is sharing with me. Because if I go into that experience and I'm all riddled with all this, you know, static electricity, I'm not going to recognize or rather understand what spirit is sharing with me, so I can convey information that is palatable for another person.
And that's true, because every time we've had an event, when I used to have it at my old studio, you always ask for like a room to be in separately,
right
to like immediately go in.
Yeah, because I remember the first time I began, and this is a perfect example how when we're open and receptive, spirit will always plant seeds of inspiration and ideas in our minds. You know, when I first began conducting like the group events, it wasn't a conscious decision. I didn't wake up and say one day, oh, you know what, I'm going to go out and do these group events, these gallery events. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was in the spring of 2007. I was promoting my book, and I was scheduled to do a book signing. I think it was like in Clinton, New Jersey, somewhere along that night. So it was a few days after the event, I got a phone call from someone and said, hey, I wanted to come to your book signing, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get there. And she said to me, would you consider coming to my home and doing a group reading type event? And I was like, I never thought about that before.
It always it happens like that, though. You know, it opens, the opportunity opens when it's time.
Absolutely. And I'm like, and I just, you know what? I know enough to just kind of go with the flow of things. Because I have never done, prior to that moment, I had never done a group gallery type reading before. I had no idea how I was going to do it, how it was going to play out. I had no idea whatsoever. But I just knew enough to just go with the flow. And I remember when I was driving to this person's home, I was getting all these ideas of how I was going to create a television show from all of this. And actually, I do have a pilot of that. It's actually on my YouTube page. It's called Evenings with Ray.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's where it was born. But what I'm emphasizing is recognizing when spirit is planting seeds of inspiration, but also too how when we're clear, grounded, and receptive,
We can recognize
it will.
yeah.
We can recognize it, but also too it comes together for us perfectly. And what I emphasize, it wasn't something that in my conscious mind I chose. It came to me. Wonderful experiences will always come to us when we're open and receptive, because you have to be open and receptive
Yes.
to alternative possibilities, but also, too, being clear and grounded and protected against any etheric negative discord and energetic influences.
Yeah. Like it's always good to have an idea of, I'm going to tie this into like manifesting a little bit
Sure.
because that's just like a really
Yeah.
hot
Oh,
topic.
absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's always good to like be manifesting
open.
and have an idea of what you want, but you can't make the parameters around it.
Correct.
You have to just be open for it to be delivered and happen in a way that the universe decides.
Yeah. But remember, spirit can see the bigger picture. The universe
Yeah.
can see the bigger picture. We only see like a little window of whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
spirit can see the bigger picture. Spirit can see the entire jigsaw puzzle. We only see little pieces of it.
I know.
And if we, in our minds, and that's the ego sometimes that thinks we know better
Mm-hmm.
and we know it all, then that's very limiting. That limits the possibilities. We can plant the seeds. We can create and formulate the ideas in our mind, but always be open to the suggestions that spirit will share to you, how to bring that to form, or rather how to allow spirit to bring it to form.
And to allow spirit to guide you a little bit too.
To bring it to form, to be guided, but also to understand that you're being shown something that might be greater than you can imagine.
Yeah, and I'll give an example just because I'm so excited and this just happened.
That's a good example. That's a very good example.
It's a very good example.
That is a
So
very good
I have been
example,
planning to move to Maine for months. Nobody understood my move, whatever. I'm doing it anyway.
Good for you.
When I went up there in January, I went around the areas and I was like, before I went there, I was like, Biddeford, maybe. And I went there and I was like, not too big on Biddeford, but I'm still going to let it open, right? I just went to San Diego for a week for work this past week, got home Monday, and I was like, I need to get to Maine on Thursday. Something was just telling me I need to get to Maine on Thursday. Made a few appointments, see apartments. They were all awful. And then all of a sudden, the last one, I really liked this property manager, and I was saying to my mom on the way up, I really, really like Michelle. I like this woman. At the end of the last showing, I was like, oh, well, I guess I have to come up here again. She's like, actually, I have pictures of something that's not even on the website yet.
Is that something?
And it was cheaper than everything I had looked at. It was better and bigger than everything I had looked at. And now I'm probably signing a lease on Monday.
And that's a perfect example of being clear and grounded and allowing that experience in the universe to bring you something even greater than you can imagine.
Even greater. And it's a beautiful place. It's in absolutely wonderful condition with a landlord that doesn't raise the rent
That's so cool.
and includes heat.
Yeah.
I can't, I mean, honestly, I really hit the jack and a washer dryer, hit the jackpot.
Spirit will always share with us something greater than we can possibly imagine.
Yes.
We just need to get out of our own way most of the time, and allow it to happen. Many times, so many feel like, we need to be in control, whatever. Sometimes if we're allowing spirit to just kind of guide us and do what it needs to do, you're not necessarily being out of control of the situation. You are instrumental in what's coming.
Absolutely.
I refer to it as being co-creative with spirit. Work with
I like
spirit.
that.
Work with spirit
Right.
to bring you some of your greatest desires.
Because we still have to do legwork here. It's
Of
not like you
course,
just ask
absolutely.
spirit. You have to
Yeah.
show spirit that you're.
Yeah.
I always say you have to show spirit that you're serious about
Sure,
something,
absolutely.
and that you are taking steps towards it. And the more steps, even the baby steps that you take
Mm-hmm.
towards it, that gives the momentum with spirit to be like,
Sure.
okay, she really does want
Yeah.
this. She believes in this, and then it just like propels you forward to what you want.
Absolutely. Another thing I learned a long time ago is the importance of actually, and this goes back to protection, of really creating boundaries with the spirit
Yes.
realm. Because spirit can very easily overstep those boundaries, as well as our consciousness being infiltrated by some very dark dark energy that sometimes may appear as though it's not dark. You know, and when you're clear and grounded, you know what you need to stay away from. You know if something is trying to interfere. I remember, you know, many years ago, a client, and I might have said this before, a client once said to me that whenever they pass a cemetery, they're always like, oh, if anybody wants to talk to me, I'm here. I'm like, oh, no, you don't do that.
Like, why? No.
Because you don't know what you're inviting in. Remember,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that vampire thing. The energy, spirit can't cross your threshold unless you invite it in.
That's why they say, have you ever heard that you should never have a mat that says welcome in front of your front door?
That I have not heard, but that makes a tremendous amount of sense.
My mat says welcome, and I'm getting a new one when I move. But I heard that, and I was like,
that's very powerful, actually.
yes.
You know what? And you know what? Just that actually, that's a good topic. But we don't understand how these very simple, what might seem to be innocent gesture, may inadvertently bring in a lot of dark energy. I remember this was quite a few years ago. I was over at my brother's house, and my niece was in her room listening to this horrific music. And I said to her, honey, you know, if you're not careful, you're going to be opening up portals to the underworld. And she just kind of like looked at me.
She's going to be in therapy 10 years from now being like, well, my uncle said. And then I never slept again.
What uncle says to their 10-year-old niece, honey, if you're not careful, you're going to be opening up the portals to the underworld.
Oh, my God. She totally has to remember that.
I'm sure she does.
There's no way
But what
she
I'm
doesn't.
emphasizing, we don't understand how sometimes these very simple, seeming, innocent gestures.
Like watching
Open
a
up.
certain show.
Oh, yeah.
There are certain shows I will put on.
Yeah.
And I'll have to shut off 10 seconds later because I just feel horrible watching it.
Oh, I give you a perfect. Well, you know, I don't judge anyone in what they're doing, but you know what? As I said, we have to really be careful and understand as much as we can what we're exposing ourselves to. You know, like a lot of these individuals that like dabble in certain things, like paranormal investigations. You know, and again, I don't discourage anyone from doing anything. I strongly, emphatically suggest to really understand what you're exposing yourself to and how to keep yourself protected from it. You know, there was, I don't think I want to mention it or which show, but there was a show there, and I think it's still out there, one of those paranormal shows. And over the years, I observed the lead individual of the show becoming very, very dark to the point where it's like, I don't, like you said, I don't like to watch that stuff only because of what I feel coming through, you know, and I've seen many individuals dabble in certain things like paranormal investigations, exploring, you know, certain crafts, certain modalities, and going down some very, very, very dark roads.
I could see that.
You know, I just recently, a few weeks ago, I heard the news of someone that I once knew who took his life. And I had lost track or lost contact with him over the years. And I always find it very interesting that spirit will always keep me away from things that could potentially harm me or influence me, especially psychically or energetically. And I didn't realize it, but I didn't have a connection with him. We were friends since, I don't know, maybe the early 2000s. And I don't remember when I lost contact with him, but I was looking on my Facebook page at one. I noticed that I wasn't connected with him on Facebook anymore, but I was looking at some of the past messages that were still there. And it goes back to the last interaction I had with him was probably around 2017. And he was telling me how he was going into mediumship work. And the last thing that I said to him, and I got no response, was, you know, certainly with all of that, just really learn how to keep yourself clear and protected and grounded. And I never heard from him again until a few weeks ago when I heard that he had that he took his own life. You know, and we don't share this information to create fear. It's not about creating fear. We do need to be aware. I would never discourage anyone from exploring the wonderful realms of the metaphysics and the paranormal. However, we need to be so aware of the importance of keeping ourselves protected because there's some very, very dark energy out there, especially these days. It's running rampant. We're kind of going back to like an astrology thing. We're in an eclipse season, and these eclipses coming up will be stirring up a lot of that dark, discordant energy that's out there, but so that it can be released.
Yes, everything's
It's
coming
purging
to the surface.
so that it can be cleared and released. You see? And we can certainly keep ourselves shielded and protected against any of those negative influences, but you have to understand and employ the tools so to do that.
Exactly. So speaking of tools, what are some of your go-to methods?
Well, certainly there's that one. I don't have the book, but I did mention a book that I always suggest to my clients called Spiritual Clearings that offers many very simple techniques how to clear yourself, but also tools to employ to keep yourself protected and grounded.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be so very complex.
No.
These availabilities don't have to be so complicated. There are some very simple techniques that we can use every day to keep ourselves shielded and protected. But also, you have to remember, spirit can't override your free will. Mm-hmm. You can't just expect to do something for protection, but then expose yourself to, experiences.
To the elements.
I'm not here to tell anybody what they should or should not do. That's not what I'm here to do. But, one of my sayings is there's a reason why alcohol is referred to as spirits.
Yes, I stopped drinking, and I was in my 20s and 30s. Yeah. I didn't drink like every day, but I was a pretty binge drinker on the weekends, and every time I did, I would turn into like a different emotional, or I'd want to fight somebody.
And that was the influence of probably like an attachment or an entity that was causing that to happen.
It was, but when I started doing this in like I can count since 2017 when I started doing this work, I've gotten drunk twice. I don't even casually drink.
I would have maybe a glass of wine or a beer here and there. But it was at the last time an alcoholic beverage passed my lips was at the end of 2012 when I had an experience at someone's home after having a glass or two of wine, and I started seeing just very strange and surreal things, and I realized that my spiritual guard was being let down, that I was allowing myself to be spiritually vulnerable.
Yeah, I can understand that because and I don't do this often. I don't go to bars often. I don't go out with my friends none of my friends go out drinking. We're too old.
Yeah.
But when I used to, or if I'm around a lot of people that are drinking, I feel like I'm drunk.
I had one experience. The Park Tavern in East Rutherford?
Oh, I used to work there.
Oh, did you really?
And I will tell you a story when you're done.
I haven't been there in years. I think one of the last times I was there was maybe 10 or 12 years ago. Yeah. And I would drink water. I was with a group of friends. There was a small group of us from high school that we would get together periodically, and they would always love to go to the Park Tavern.
Yeah.
I haven't been there since. However, we were in whatever area, and I was standing next to someone who was absolutely polluted. I walked out of there feeling like I was drinking.
Wasted.
And all I had was water. I had was water.
Well, that place.
Oh, there's some,
That place. I have found that everybody that works there for an extended period of time just goes darker and darker and darker. I also, because I worked there when I first learned Reiki in 2017. Uh-huh. And what happened was I would be walking, and I know now what happened, but I would be walking and serving tables, and then all of a sudden get the whole time, or I would be doing something, then all of a sudden get this flash of extreme anxiety and what am I doing? Was I really here? And there was so many stories of activity. We would be across the room, and the broom that was propped not to fall would just fall and hit somebody.
Isn't that something?
There were so many stories. But it's been since I stopped working there, I think I've been there once for a party in the basement.
No, I won't.
I will not go there. No. And it's a shame because their food's actually really good. But I won't even get takeout.
No, because who knows what's connected to that as well energetically.
Yeah. But I think I worked there for 6 or 7 months in 2017.
And I tell you, as dedicated as I am to all of this, every once in a while, and I'm not above any of this, I still, every once in a while, actually just a few days ago, I had an experience where I was with a group of people on Sunday, just two other friends of mine from college, and we were talking about certain things, meaning more so some other individuals who have some very dark energy connected to them.
Yeah.
I woke up in the middle of the night with a vertigo experience. To me, I understand that that's an attachment. That is much, and what I emphasize is even though I employ so many tools and modalities to keep myself protected, every once in a while something will find a way to get in. Whether it's because most of the time it's because if I'm feeling just very depleted, because that's when really we're
vulnerable,
the most spiritually vulnerable.
Which is interesting you say that, because so when I was in San Diego for work, I was working like 14-hour days.
Yeah.
And then the last night before we left, we went to a restaurant. It had to have so many spirits and everything in it, because I'm sitting at the table. I couldn't concentrate on what anybody was saying. I felt like I was in another realm. I kept getting the dizzy spells. And I said at one point at the table in the beginning, I was like, hey guys, there's something in here that's really fucking with me. So if I seem like I'm not paying attention, like I am, but there's a very strong, energetic, spiritual presence here, and I cannot concentrate on anything. I might think on my work people know.
They understand.
And they understand.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, personally, especially these days, I'd rather not go anywhere if I don't have to. I don't go to malls. I don't go to establishments where there's larger groups of people. I can't even walk into a food store sometimes. If I do my food shopping, it's generally first thing in the morning before anybody else is there.
I can't do ShopRite in Lyndhurst.
There's a portal there.
I can't do. I have felt for years that it was evil, and I couldn't go there.
People completely take leave of their senses, even as soon as they go into the parking lot.
My dad used to hang out there. He would go there and get coffee and then shop.
There used to be what was there before, I believe, was some kind of like a chemical plant. Something. Yeah, there's some. I go to the ShopRite in Wallington because that one. I've walked in there where I've been completely stunad, and I don't even know why I'm here.
I feel like the whole company of ShopRite though. There's something behind. There's something that I've always had like a weird taste.
Absolutely. Yeah.
In my mouth for places like that.
But my point being is that, and I remember one time, I think it was in that ShopRite years ago, it was quite a while ago, they were doing some renovations, and I walked in and I see this woman, she walks in and she just stops and puts her head in her hands. I'm like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. As soon as she walked in there. And my point being is, how many of us have these experiences and we have no idea what the hell is going on?
We think it's, and for a period of time, I was like, what am I doing in my life for my anxiety to be so high? Like, what is happening? And, you rack your brain and you're like, well, maybe it's because I ate this or maybe I did this. And there's that extra layer of the energy and the spirit that not everybody thinks about.
Or is aware of. Absolutely. Yeah.
And should be a thought incorporated into when we're not feeling well.
Absolutely. As a part of the understanding as to the discord that we experience.
Yes.
I believe that once we really observe all of this from a metaphysical, spiritual perspective, and I'm referring to like the imbalances, I believe that they will be corrected much more effectively. I mean, and again, we're not here to tell anybody what they should or not shouldn't do.
No.
If you need medication, you do what you need to do.
Yep.
But you know what? If medication was so effective, why are so many people sick? Why do you need medication for forever in your life?
Yeah.
I mean, again, we're not here to tell what they should and shouldn't do. However, you know what? Do some research. Really understand and recognize your own being. It's kind of like, I probably should have included this in my astrology segment, but one of the first things that we learn in astrology is to really understand our own chart first.
That's smart.
Before you start looking at other people's charts. Really know. It's like that saying, to thy known self be true, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Really understand your own personal self and how you operate and how your body functions. I mean, there's similarities with all of us.
Yeah.
At the core level, we're all connected and we're all created, if you will, to use that term, or evolutionarily created from that same source. But because we're in the third dimension right now and in the world of density and matter, we're going to all have we may have different experiences. But when we correct all of this from a greater alternative understanding, if you will, I believe that the healing, if you want to use that term, will be much more effective. And like incorporating modalities like Reiki,
Yes.
which addresses the imbalances from etheric spiritual level.
God, I love Reiki so much.
It's very powerful.
It is
very,
changed.
very powerful.
It has changed my entire being and life and operating. Yeah. And I would like to have like a glance into my life, what it was like before I learned it, just a day to see like what my mind really, because it was such an immediate change that I had. Yeah. And going back to like the spiritual protection thing, I am surprised it was never brought up with it was the first thing that was taught to me.
Well, you learned at a different time than I did.
That is true. A much different time.
We learned at a very different time.
Yeah.
It was touched upon, but it wasn't really, like drilled into my consciousness, the importance of it.
Yeah. And I think the first time I really learned about it was like 2008.
Okay.
It was the first time that
That's
it
when
came
I began.
up.
That's actually when I really began understanding, only because I had gone into at that time, a very, very dark time.
Yeah.
And it was really because I wasn't clearing myself of all of this discord. I also, and I'm not going to elaborate on it as well, but I also had an experience where something jumped from someone else to me, meaning an entity.
Yeah.
And that which caused me to go into a very, very, very dark place. And I'm grateful. And I also will emphasize that I know I needed to have that experience so that I have a greater understanding as to how all of this works.
And that's how it works when you're in this world too, when you're very vocal like we are about helping other people. We need to, in a way, have those experiences to understand.
Yeah. But also too, we're also attacked a lot more. Much more. I've always said this. I've been very grateful that I've been able to do this and walk this path for so many years. But I tell you, literally from the moment that I chose in my mind that I was going to pursue an alternative path, what came after me to try to stop me, I could never have imagined. Maybe one day I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But my God, I could never have imagined what had come after me.
And it's you think of it when you're trying to go against the norm too, that you get negativity from people in your life that don't understand because they would never do it too. Yeah. But you're not even just talking about that. You're talking about just other levels.
This is a whole different realm. I've had things choke me, attack me, assault me. It was just, and that's even putting it mildly.
That's crazy.
But also too, what I really, it just it's very sad. And, another experience I had with a really, really good friend of mine who is no longer here because of his own doing, because he was a paranormal investigator. He wasn't doing it full time. His group was actually one of the first groups considered for one of the early paranormal shows that are on TV. And for whatever reason, it went into a different direction. And I knew he was working with one of the big producers. I think he was the producer of the show Survivor. I forgot, Mark Burnett or something like that. And I know he was, and I always said to him that, or I always tried to help him recognize his own connection with spirit, because I had his chart, so I could see how connected he was with the spirit realm. And he respected me, but he discredited what I said to him about having the connection with spirit. And I observed at one point he was going down a very, very dark road, and I kept trying to reach out to him, and for whatever reason, I couldn't make a connection with him. Looking back, I understand spirit was keeping me away from him.
Spirit was, yeah.
And I was in Florida I think it was in the spring of 2011, and I went to the back door of the house where I was staying, and I got this strong impression of something that kind of jumped out at me. And I'm like, I didn't really think too much about it. Less than an hour later, I got a phone call that my friend had taken his life.
Oh, my goodness.
Before that happened, I knew that they were filming, I think, a pilot for some kind of a television show. I didn't know where he was, and I didn't know what they were filming or where they were filming. Later on, I found out, because after he had got back from this experience is when he went down the rabbit hole to a very, very dark place. I had found out that where they were investigating was where the Manson murders took place.
Oh my God. I would never.
No, like what's that place? Eastern State Penitentiary?
Well, there's also
I would never go there.
Alcatraz.
I would never go into any of those places.
How people do tours of that.
No.
I don't understand.
Absolutely
I don't understand how it feels okay, even going near something like
most don't recognize when they're feeling something because you're not taught to. You don't have a point of reference. You don't have a point of reference as to what it feels when you're in a very dark place. Although most people are having the experience but not honoring and acknowledging what they're feeling and sensing. Mm-hmm. You see? And again, it goes back to if you're not clear and grounded, you're not going to recognize that. You need to stay away from a place.
How do you feel about when people tour things like the Holocaust camps or even like the 9/11 museum?
You know what? I suggest just, proceeding with caution.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand about having the awareness and understanding it all. However, there is some very dark energy that is connected to those locations.
Right.
Before, I think it was in 2004, before they finished whatever they were building at Ground Zero there, I was going into Manhattan with a friend of mine, and we took the train into World Trade Center. And I didn't realize that we were actually going into like Ground Zero. I don't know why I didn't think about it. But I remember as soon as we got there, oh my God, what I was feeling, I couldn't get myself out of there fast enough.
I can't imagine because I was working a few blocks from there.
Okay.
In 2008.
Yeah.
And that's when I started hearing voices calling my name.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Like constantly.
Yeah, I personally, and I don't know if it's still, I think it's still there in Lincoln Park in Rutherford. There's actually one of the I-beams from one of the towers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know if it's still there or not, but this was, again, going back quite a few years ago. I didn't know what it was, and we're walking down in Rutherford with a friend of mine. I'm like, let me go see what that is. As soon as I walked up to it, I started feeling very lightheaded. I was buzzing. And then I realized, this is one of the I-beams from one of the towers.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, I know I've mentioned feeling like dizzy, being around spirit and energy. Yeah. That is like because I know some people have talked to me and they're like, I don't understand, maybe my ear crystals are off. But if you're like walking or sitting somewhere and all of a sudden you feel like that, or you're walking and you're buzzing is a really good way to explain it. Yeah. You're probably coming across some kind of energy that's outside of yourself. Yeah. So just keep that in your mind.
Again, you know what? We're not here to diagnose or whatever. We're here to offer suggestions, and alternative possibilities as to how to correct these imbalances from a much more spiritual and metaphysical perspective. Yeah.
So let's end now because I love bringing everything everywhere except for what we actually start talking about.
And it's a perfect example of how these conversations work themselves out.
Yeah, I mean, we try to define topics, but this one, we went fucking everywhere.
But you know what, though? There was a movie in the 80s called Mind Walk. Have you ever heard of it? Where there's these group of 4 people, they got together, and they started having these conversations, and they were going down these roads that they could have never imagined that they would follow. And they went on this mind walk. It's kind of what we do when we engage in these conversations.
Yeah, and
that's cool though.
I'm not a rigid person anyway with an agenda, and I know you're not either.
No.
Like
and it's better not to be. I would suggest. I think it's better not to be.
No, I agree. I agree with you because you never know what's
Let spirit orchestrate.
Let spirit guide you.
There you go.
And bring it to where you need to be and to you guys for what you need to hear. Because that's one of the most comments that I get from all these podcasts is like, I feel like you were talking to me. I feel like that's something I needed to hear. Yep. And it's just so cool. So I'm just going to name some things that I do for myself and in my home to protect, and then you can do it too. So one thing I do is I'm not a huge crystal person, but I have my favorites.
No, nice.
Like selenite.
Nice.
I mean, who can't like that? So I actually, in my home, in my back hallway, I made a crystal grid with selenite, with crystal in every single selenite in every corner. And then in my home, I put selenite on all my windows.
Selenite is very powerful.
Yeah.
Selenite is a great grounding tool.
Yeah. So I do that. I also carry crystals in my bra. because women do not have a lot of pockets.
Mm-hmm.
So if I need, like when I just went on site, I had black tourmaline for protection and some selenite that I shoved in there.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Sometimes I sleep with selenite underneath my pillow just to clear my mind as I'm doing that. I also do the Archangel Michael
protection.
That's
very powerful.
Light of protection. Yeah, and you can do it anywhere.
Powerful.
I actually tell my
powerful.
clients, I'm like, look, if you're not feeling good, if you're at work or you're in a situation, go in the bathroom and do it. Go in the stall and visualize this white light of protection.
Yeah.
And I also feel like a big thing behind it is believing you're protected as well.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Is the belief and the trust that you're protected.
It's working
you
with
can't
spirit.
Just be like, let's just see if this works. No, it's like, this is on. I am protected. So those are some of my favorite things. And then for clearing, Epsom salt bath, my favorite thing in the entire universe.
I actually, beneath my bed, I have these huge rods of selenite.
Oh, I never thought of doing that.
They're about 20 inches long, and they're thick. And I have 4 of them just kind of gritting the
Yeah, and I know my cat wouldn't disturb them because she doesn't care about anything else.
Also, too, they weigh a ton.
Oh.
You know?
That's okay.
But you know what, though? Actually, we didn't talk about this as well. You know, it's important, certainly, to keep yourself energetically protected, but also your home.
Yeah.
We don't also understand that as well. You know, do you recognize how old churches always have red doors?
I never noticed that.
But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
That's for protection.
I like that.
You know, and there's also, you know, these like, I don't like to use the term old wives' tales, but the old women would always put red ribbons on babies' cribs for protection. And do you know why you give a baby a rattle?
No.
Well, you've heard of rattling.
To get it to keep the spirits away?
To keep away the negative energy. The rattling, it's actually a shamanic tool.
Yes, it is. That's true. My shaman girl has that. And sometimes when I tell people if they feel negative energy to kind of like
to clap
it, and to also a easy clearing thing is just brush stuff up, but do it out of your home.
Yeah, but you see how
you go in.
But you see how we're so unaware of how all of these are in very subtle ways in our consciousness, like giving a baby a rattle.
Yeah, it's what happens now. Yeah. Every baby, they probably think it's to entertain the baby.
Or to entertain or to appease them or to keep them
and it probably does to a point.
But to a point, sure. But it's really about keeping away the dark negative energy.
Yeah, because they're very open.
Of course they are.
They're so open.
Of course they are. Absolutely. Yeah. And the red door, you know, I always suggest, you know, paint the front door of your home red.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I do put selenite over my doorways as well.
You know, and being a Reiki master, you would appreciate this. I would sometimes when I would do clearings in people's homes, I always go with what I'm shown that needs to be done with a certain experience, like a clearing of a home. But a few times I remember being shown, or I suggested for the homeowner, get decent size flat river rocks and paint the Chokuray Reiki symbol on it and put it on the corner of each of your home, at the outside corner of each of the house, to energetically keep it vibrationally high.
I really like that.
River rocks, flat river rocks. Because look at what you're using. You're using something, a very natural element that's connected with water.
Yeah.
And you're infusing that Reiki element onto there.
Ooh.
You see? Because also, too, you have to, you know, it's like I said earlier about, you know what, that dark energy can't cross your threshold unless you invite it in. But we have to keep our homes energetically protected as well.
Yeah, so no more welcome mats.
Thank you for that.
No more welcome mats, people.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
I'm going to get a mat with a black cat.
There you go. Not a bad idea.
For my protection from
Not a bad idea.
And throw out the welcome mat.
Lots of information. You know, there's so much out there. And as always, you know what? Do the research and just embrace what you feel resonates with you. There's no wrong or right. It's what resonates with you.
Exactly. I'm all about the simplicity. When it's necessary, I will do something that has many steps depending on what's happening in my life. Yeah. But for every day, it's all about the simplicity, what I can work into my life, and all that. And with that, we're at 43 minutes.
Oh, my heavens.
Again. So thank you again.
My pleasure.
So much for coming.
It's so wonderful sharing the information.
And Tell us again, how can we find you?
My website, astrologerray.com, has all the information on there about myself and my services. So definitely check it out, and you'll find a few nice things. And also, you go to my YouTube page, which is connected on my Facebook, my website. You can come across that TV pilot that I told you about.
Yeah, I'll link it.
So.
I'll link it in the description of
Absolutely.
the podcast. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for listening, and I'll see you soon.